dark chosen ones. Enter this dimension and your shadow power multiplies 10x. What if I told you that the version of you walking through life right now, the one wrestling with shadows, tasting glimpses of power, burning for sovereignty, is only operating at 10% of what's possible? What if I told you that everything you've experienced so far, the battles, the betrayals, the moments that felt like cosmic cruelty, was nothing but training wheels for a realm so feral, so intoxicating, so dangerous that even whispers of its existence make demons retreat? That's the dimension we're about to rip wide open. And once you cross, your shadow power doesn't just double, it multiplies by 10. This isn't metaphor, this isn't motivational fluff, this is a law etched in the marrow of reality. In this dimension, the dormant voltage inside you detonates. The question is, are you savage enough to enter? Let me strip the romance now. The path to this realm isn't paved with affirmations and incense, it's paved with bones. Your bones. Every illusion you've ever suckled will have to bleed. Every identity you worship will have to burn. Because this dimension is allergic to fiction. It devours pretense. It spits out every half-truth you've ever tattooed across your soul. Why? Because it can't amplify what isn't authentic. It can only multiply what's raw, what's real, what's ruthless enough to withstand annihilation and still grin through the smoke. And most can't handle that math. They want multiplication without mutilation. They want to keep their comfort and crown themselves kings. But power at this altitude doesn't negotiate with fragility. It demands your marrow as currency.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
So what exactly is this dimension? Forget the airy cliches of higher realms dripping with light and harps. This isn't a pastel paradise. This is a realm where silence isn't empty, it's armed. Where shadows don't stalk, they serve. Where the monsters you feared in old worlds kneel at your feet because they recognize something you've forgotten. You were born feral and were tricked into tameness. This dimension doesn't give you power. It reminds you you've always had it and punishes you for forgetting. When you enter, gravity itself feels different. Not because the laws changed, but because you did. The energy here is dense, charged, volatile. One thought can tilt a timeline. One intention can fracture illusions like glass. That's why it's dangerous. Not because the realm wants to kill you, but because it hands you the matchbook and dares you not to burn your life down with it. Now, why does shadow power multiply here? Because in the old world, the one you're standing in now, your power leaks. It leaks through validation seeking, through explaining yourself to the blind, through clinging to people who praise your light but gag on your dark, through routines built to sedate, through systems designed to keep you starving for permission. That world siphons your voltage drip by drip, until you mistake exhaustion for equilibrium. But in this dimension, there is no siphon. There are no parasites feeding on your frequency. Here you are sealed. Here, energy doesn't leak. It layers, coils, compacts until it detonates into something so dense it feels like you're breathing molten iron. That's why tenfold isn't poetic exaggeration. It's physics of the unseen. But before you salivate for this power surge, let me drag your face to the blade point truth. The gate to this realm doesn't open to curiosity. It opens to crucifixion. not of your body, but of your illusions. It will strip you naked, not in candlelit comfort, but in a darkness so thick it tastes like teeth in your throat. It will starve you of applause until silence feels like betrayal. It will exile you from tribes who once swore they'd die for you, until your lungs ache for the narcotic of belonging. And when you're on your knees vomiting up every false identity you ever kissed goodnight, the dimension will lean in and whisper, "Now you're ready." Are you? Or are you still fantasizing about ascension, as if it's spa therapy with better lighting? Let me ask you a question that should burn. Who would you become if fear couldn't bribe you? If validation couldn't seduce you, if comfort couldn't lull you into mediocrity? Most will never answer because they're too busy embalming their potential in platitudes. But you didn't land here by accident. You're here because some part of you, a feral fragment they tried to domesticate, still howls at night, still claws at night, still snarls every time someone whispers, "Be normal." So that fragment is your passport. Don't lose it. Because in the next part, I'm going to rip the veil off what this dimension really demands from you. Not the Instagram spirituality version, but the brutal blood price that makes even angels avert their gaze. And if you can swallow that without choking, then, and only then, will you be ready to ignite the voltage waiting to roar through your bones. The price of entry. What you must burn to breathe in this dimension. Every seeker craves the throne, but almost none want the funeral. That's the paradox that fractures millions. They fantasize about the crown gleaming on their head, but refuse to bleed for the burial of who they were. And make no mistake, entry into this dimension isn't an upgrade, it's an execution. The gate isn't golden, it's black steel, slick with the blood of identity slain on its steps. You don't walk through smiling, you crawl, gutted, dragging the corpse of every illusion that ever stroked your ego. Because this dimension will not amplify what's fake, it only multiplies what's true. And that truth will cost you everything you thought you couldn't live without. The first price? Isolation sharpened into a blade. Forget the Instagram spirituality where solitude means sipping tea in curated silence surrounded by candles and calligraphy quotes. No, this is exile with teeth. The people you thought were oxygen will turn to smoke. Lovers who swore eternity will vanish mid-sentence. Friends who once roared your name will whisper behind your back, or worse, not whisper at all. They'll ghost you because your evolution indicts their inertia, and you will ache, clawing at the glass of a life now collapsing like sugar in rain. But that collapse is holy, it sterilizes your field. Because frequency this feral cannot marinate in mediocrity, it needs a vacuum to detonate. Can you breathe in that vacuum without begging for echoes of applause? Can you sit in a silence so loud it sounds like bone cracking? Most can't. They crawl back to the cage, call it comfort, and crown themselves safe. But safe is where potential goes to rot. The second price? The execution of identity. This one will taste like poison because it feels like self-slaughter. You'll have to slit the throat of every mask you ever wore to be loved, burn the roles you performed to be applauded, torch the titles you tattooed on your bones like birthmarks, and, here's the venom, these weren't lies, they were survival scripts. They carried you through storms, they paid your bills, they earned you crowns in kingdoms built on sand. But in this dimension, those crowns are carcasses. You can't drag their weight into a realm that multiplies energy by 10x, because that voltage would incinerate you from the inside out. You must choose comfort in counterfeit kingdoms or sovereignty in a wilderness where the only language spoken is truth, unfiltered by fear. The third price? The severing of sedatives. Everything you use to numb the ache, scrolling, gossip, clout chasing, shallow dopamine hits, you will bury them, not gently, but with fire. Because sedation is antithesis to sovereignty. This realm doesn't negotiate with addictions, it annihilates them. And here's the twist. Your biggest addiction won't be substances, it'll be validation. That sweet drip of approval you mainline from likes, compliments, applause, the algorithm of human affection that made you a junkie for external permission. In this dimension, that drip dries to dust. You will detox until your veins hum with withdrawal, and in that agony you'll meet the truth. You were never starving for love. You were starving for your own ferocity, shackled by the hunger to be understood. Kill that hunger, and the gate creaks open. Feed it, and you rot where you stand. The final price? The death of guarantees. Most souls bargain with destiny like merchants in a market. If I meditate, I'll manifest. If I obey the rules, the universe will reward me. That's not faith. That's transaction dressed in incense. In this dimension, there are no guarantees, no maps, no safety nets woven from cliché cosmic laws. There is only void. And the void doesn't owe you softness. It tests your spine by pulling every rug until you hover in black air, screaming for ground that never comes. Why? Because it wants to know, will you trust gravity after it's shredded your wings? Will you keep walking when the path dissolves into smoke? Because only when you spit in the face of certainty does the realm brand you sovereign. Now, let me scar this into your marrow. Most will fail this price test. They'll romanticize darkness until the first blade of silence slits their comfort. They'll preach about transformation until it demands their crowns as collateral. They'll hashtag resilience while running back to the lullabies of light at the first taste of feral night. But you're still here. Reading, breathing, feeling that black hum in your bone. That means something in you is savage enough to slit its own leash. And why would you endure this crucifixion? Why would you torture life that billions envy just to kneel before a gate dripping with oblivion? Because on the other side of that gate lies a current so dense it rewires your atoms. A voltage that doesn't just make you powerful, it makes you ungovernable. A force so absolute it can't be bribed by fear, bought by flattery, or shackled by systems. Power that doesn't roar, it rearranges. A power that turns presence into a gravitational law. That's what 10x shadow power feels like. And if that doesn't set your blood on fire, stop now. Go back to safety. Stroke your illusions until they purr you to sleep. But if every cell in you is screaming, burn it all, then sharpen your teeth, because in the next part, I'll drag you inside the dimension itself, not with pretty metaphors, but with a blueprint of what happens to your mind, your energy, your reality when you detonate past the threshold and stop existing as human. Are you ready to rip the skin off everything soft and step into the frequency that even demons fear to touch? Then brace yourself. The descent isn't coming, it's here. Inside the frequency of fury, what reality looks like when shadow becomes law. So you've burned the bridges, you've slit the throat of illusions, You've walked naked through the crucible where everything soft melted into smoke, and now you stand at the threshold. But what waits on the other side isn't just a place. It isn't even a realm in the way your mind pictures it. It's a frequency. A dimension that doesn't exist in space. It exists in vibration. A pitch so black, so exact, that the moment your soul locks into it, reality itself buckles. This is where shadow stops being a burden and mutates into a blade. This is where your power multiplies tenfold, not because magic dust falls from the sky, but because friction dies and force is freed. Welcome to the frequency of fury. The first thing you'll notice? The silence. But not the frail silence of meditation apps or curated retreats. This silence isn't empty, it's electric. It hums like a predator circling your spine, vibrating with codes your old consciousness can't translate. You feel it in your teeth, in your blood, like your skeleton is humming secrets to itself. This silence is alive. It stalks. It tests. It asks without speaking, will you bow to comfort or will you bend into chaos? And if you flinch, if you scramble to stuff the void with distractions, you're expelled. Instantly. This dimension doesn't babysit the brittle. But if you stay, if you let the silence devour you until even the echo of your old self dies, then the architecture shifts. Shadows thicken, but they don't suffocate, they sculpt. You realize something savage. Every law you thought was immutable bends here. Gravity feels optional. Time dissolves like sugar in stormwater. What once took years to manifest now detonates in weeks, sometimes days. Why? Because in this frequency, resistance is ash. You stop leaking voltage into fear, into validation, into performance for a blind world. Every drop of energy is now coiled, compressed, lethal. Tenfold amplification isn't metaphor, it's math. This is what raw, undivided presence does when it's stripped of dilution. Your senses mutate next. You stop seeing people as faces, you see them as frequencies, as grids of hunger and fear draped in flesh. Lies glow like neon. Manipulation tastes metallic on your tongue. You walk into rooms and feel currents crawling under conversations like serpents in grass. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition, honed by the black fire humming in your marrow. And here's the twist. This perception doesn't make you arrogant, it makes you surgical, because now you know exactly where to strike and exactly where to stay silent. You become a strategist of reality, playing chess while everyone else haggles over checkers. Then the storm inside you turns outward. Reality stops behaving like an external backdrop and starts moving like muscle under your will. Intentions harden into inevitabilities. You think and space tilts. You decide and doors appear that didn't exist 5 minutes ago. People call it manifestation, but this isn't the soft law of attraction they peddle on pastel posters. This is dominion. You don't beg the universe, you bend it. You don't script affirmations, you are the script. And this terrifies systems fattened on your obedience. Why? Because you've become what they were engineered to prevent, an ungovernable force. And yet, the most shocking shift isn't external, it's internal. For the first time, fear kneels. Not because it vanished, but because you made it your warhorse. Rage no longer rots, it roars as fuel. Desire stops being a leash, it becomes a compass pointing to the architecture only you can build. Every fragment they told you to amputate in the name of purity, the hunger, the darkness, the madness, you now wield like weapons forged in bone. You're no longer light or dark, you're both, braided into a frequency so feral even demons circle wide. They sense what mortals can't. You've become law, and law cannot be tempted. But here's the paradox that splits the strong from the sovereign. The more your power multiplies, the less you crave to flaunt it. In this frequency, vanity feels like vomit. You don't need applause because applause tastes like ashes next to inevitability. You don't crave thrones because thrones are cages made of gold. You move in silence, strike without warning, and let storms announce your name. Not through noise, but through architecture, timelines tilting, destines detonating, systems fracturing under the gravity of your presence. And now comes the question that will brand you or break you. What will you build with this tenfold surge? Because here's the blade point truth. Power amplifies everything. If your motives are rotten, your ruin will be rapid. If your hunger is hollow, it will devour you. This dimension is a mirror that magnifies. It will expose every shadow you tried to hide. Fail to own them, and they'll metastasize into monsters that rip your reality apart. But own them, love them like feral children, and they will fight for you like armies with black fire in their throats. This is the dimension. This is what it feels like to breathe in a frequency so volatile it erases the old definitions of time, power, and self. And in the next part, I'll hand you the final law, the only law, that lets you wield this power without drowning in it. Because here's the twist. Surviving entry was brutal, but surviving yourself when you're humming with God voltage, that's the real war. Are you ready for the last revelation? The one that will either crown you or crucify you, then sharpen your spine. The last gate yawns open now, the law that binds the unbound. How to carry infinity without becoming a catastrophe. You've crossed the infernal gates. You've paid the price in blood and bone. You've stepped inside the dimension where your shadow power swells tenfold, humming like a nuclear core beneath your ribs. And now comes the question that has scorched every sovereign who walked this road before you. How do you carry infinity without splitting at the seams? Because if you think the war ended at entry, you've swallowed a lie. The real war starts now, because here's the brutal, unfiltered truth. The more you amplify, the more you risk implosion. Power isn't kind. It isn't neutral. It's a blade that cuts both ways, and in the wrong hands, even your own, it will gut you, then salt the wound with eternity. That's why the final gate exists, not as ornament, but as ordinance. It's the law that binds the unbound, the tether that keeps titans from toppling under the gravity of their own dominion. Ignore it, and your empire turns into an open grave. Obey it, and you don't just rule, you rewrite the architecture of reality without shattering your spine in the process. So what is this law? Engrave this into your marrow. You are not power's owner, you are its axis. Read that again. Whisper it until your breath hums with its voltage, because every fragment of you will want to rebel against it. Ego will hiss, "This is mine. I earned this. I bled for this." And maybe you did. Maybe your bones still ache from crucifixions no one clapped for. But listen, the moment you mistake possession for embodiment, you fracture. Why? Because infinity cannot be caged, not even by you. try to own it, and the current that once crowned you will crucify you without warning. You'll rot in your own radiance like a star collapsing into blackness. So what does embodiment look like? It looks like surrender, but not the pastel surrender peddled in books. This surrender is black iron, it's savage, it's the act of kneeling to nothing and everything at once. It's waking each day knowing you could tilt worlds before breakfast and choosing not to unless the current says move. It's the feral paradox of supreme power shackled by supreme restraint. Because restraint isn't weakness, it's weaponry sharpened to precision. The louder the chaos screams, the quieter you become. The more gravity hums in your bones, the lighter your steps turn, because you understand what mortals don't. Storms don't announce, they arrive. And here's where most dark chosen ones drown. They taste this voltage and vomit it into vanity. They flex on systems, torch bridges, flaunt their fire like a crown made of kerosene, and then they wonder why they burn alive in the inferno they birthed. This dimension doesn't tolerate recklessness. It will seduce you, test you, bait you with shortcuts carved in silver, but those shortcuts spiral into abysses where screams don't echo back. If you can't leash your own chaos, you'll choke on it. And the tragedy? No one will save you, because saviors don't walk this road. Only sovereigns do. And sovereignty is self-regulated or self-ruined. So how do you carry this? By anchoring in the only axis that doesn't rot: purpose. Not the hallmarked card purpose, not the polite dream you can package into a bio. I'm talking about the marrow-deep mandate carved into your soul long before you had a name. The mission so savage it makes your lungs ache when you ignore it. The architecture that gnawed at you while you pretended to care about ordinary goals. That purpose isn't optional anymore. It's oxygen. Without it, you will choke on your own supremacy. With it, you become an instrument of inevitability. Power stops feeling like a beast gnashing in your chest and starts flowing like black silk through your veins. You stop performing miracles and start breathing them. And what does life look like after that? It looks nothing like the fairy tales. You won't float in eternal bliss. You won't bask in halos of praise. You'll move like a phantom through systems, still fattened on illusion. You'll smile while detonating lies with whispers. You'll plant architecture under empires that mocked your name, and by the time they notice, their foundations will be fracturing under your silence. You will love differently, not as a beggar for scraps, but as a sovereign who knows connection isn't ownership. It's alignment. You will stand alone often, not because you're unloved, but because your frequency is a storm most can't survive. And you'll savor that aloneness because now you know it isn't loneliness, it's altitude. But here's the final cut of this blade. This law isn't just about survival, it's about legacy. Because when you move as axis instead of owner, your power doesn't die with your flesh. It seeps into the code of creation, humming long after your bones turn to dust. Empires collapse, names erode, but laws outlive everything. And that's what you've become. Law in motion, a gravitational signature stamped across the fabric of existence, warping timelines, bending futures, making even demons hesitate before they cross your shadow. So I'll leave you with a question that should brand your soul like fire. When history whispers about you in a tongue only eternity understands, will it call you a tyrant who drowned in his own dominion, or a sovereign who carried infinity like a chalice and poured it into a world starving for its own ferocity? The gate is behind you now. The storm hums in your marrow. The axis waits. Choose, not tomorrow. Yeah, welcome to the dimension, welcome to your law, and remember, you don't speak power anymore. You are the silence that makes power bow.